Record button. Welcome to Horse Racing World Channel, our first Horse Racing World Channel Sports Special. And this channel was always designed to accommodate maybe a few other things besides horse racing. You know us best for our Saddle Up podcast with myself and Steve Pollock, and good luck to Steve this weekend at the NHC. Hope he knocks him dead. But Steve's not here today. Instead, we have a special guest here, and we're not going to be talking about horse racing. Please welcome back to the show somebody that many of you know from the Inside Racing radio show, Jason Levin. Hello, Jason.
Hey, happy to be here. Say hello to everybody. What's up?
Jason, as longtime listeners of the Inside Radio Show know, you're a huge basketball fan, and as we all know, your teams are the Knicks and the Clippers. And both are doing pretty well, though the Knicks kind of faced a landmine this weekend through LA. So I'm just kind of curious, when those two teams meet up, where does the rubble hit the road, man? Which one, who do you have to root for when you have to choose?
Well, if it's a Clipper home game, I'm there with my wife, and so I have to root for the Clippers because she's all in on the Clippers, and we go to almost all the games. So, yeah, if it's on TV and it's a Nick home game, I'm kind of stuck. In my deepest heart, I'm rooting for the Knicks, but on the surface, I'll go for the Clippers. Neither has had a chance to do anything in a while, so there's not that much on the line, and they only play twice, so it doesn't hurt me too bad.
Yeah. Knicks, no surprise this year. I mean, they are loaded for bear, even though they haven't been playing at their best last couple of weeks. They've had a great season and a good chance to come out of the East. Clippers shocked everybody. After that start, look at them now. They're a 500 team.
It's wild. I mean, what a to be a season ticket holder and go to all the games. I couldn't believe how bad they were for about 5 weeks and how every break went against them and every shot that needed to go in didn't. It was kind of hard to watch. And now it's the exact opposite. And whenever they need to make a play, they do. And it's just really been fun to watch and exciting. And they kind of are a different team now. They're faster, they're younger, they play faster, they're more fun to watch. The ball moves. James Harden is gone. So it's a whole team effort, and Kawhi Leonard is just, I mean, to me, he's the best complete player in the league. Wembanyama is just as good. Shea is just as good, but I would take Kawhi against either of them any day of the week. The guy's been playing out of his mind. So to see him in person every night has been a joy for someone who loves basketball because he plays hard, he plays the right way, he doesn't complain, and he just lights guys up.
Yeah. Well, Jason, you and I are both basketball aficionados, but we're not here today to primarily talk about the current season, but we're going to go back in the time machine. We're going to way back to the days of the American Basketball Association. Jason, very good. You have one of those, but just to tell you I've got my cred, so do I.
Atta boy, there we
Except,
go.
except mine's deflated. I haven't had this thing inflated in like 30 years. I don't know if you've ever tried to play with that thing, but they weren't the best built basketball for playing.
They were not. I had one as a kid. As soon as I saw my first ABA game on TV, I told my mom, and we didn't have a lot of money, but I said, I need a new basketball, and it's got to be the red, white, and blue one. It's the coolest thing ever. And for anybody that's played with one over the years, it's much more fun to shoot because of the spin.
Hmm.
And you get the right spin, and when it's spinning and goes in, it looks tremendous. So it was a great idea by the ABA. It was a great marketing gimmick. And I certainly had a lot of fun with it as a kid. I was the kid that had the red, white, and blue ball. Everybody else had the brown ball. And I think everybody wanted to play with mine. So, yeah, I'm happy to get one now. And by the way, I should let everybody know this is a new one, and you can get them at Lana Sports, Lana. And this is actually a big benefit. When you buy one, and I think you get a deal now, and I'm sure you get, I think, 20% off, all the money goes directly to help ex-ABA players.
That's
It's
awesome.
through a foundation called Dropping Dimes. They were instrumental in the documentary. They're in the documentary, and the Atlanta sports people who made the ball are the same as the dropping dimes people. And so not only do you get the amazing ball, and it's much better than the early ones, by the way. This one is well made, so it's all good. And all the money goes to help out guys that need it. Medical bills, electricity bills, whatever it might be, it goes right to that. So pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you shop on eBay these days, Jason, if you can get one autographed by Dr. J, those balls are worth $300-400. So if you ever catch him at a card show or something, bring your ball over, get him to sign. That'll be a nice investment.
Yeah, I'm gonna meet him soon enough, after the success of the documentary. So I'm super excited about that. I met him a few times when I used to cover the NBA. He was the classiest guy in the whole league, which was his reputation, and he was all of that and more. I can tell you that it was a thrill for me every time I got a chance to meet him, speak to him for just a minute or two or more after a game, and he was just the man. He was all that and more. So sometimes your legends don't live up to it. You meet him and you're like, oh, that guy wasn't, that was kind of crappy. Dr. J was as good as it gets.
Yeah. And talking about that documentary, you are involved intimately in a new documentary. It's a four-part series on Amazon Prime called Soul Power that goes through the ABA. It's probably the most comprehensive documentary ever made on the ABA. And before we start talking about that, Jason, let's take a look at the trailer.
Let's
And
do it.
as regular watchers of this channel know, I am not always the most adept in getting this smoothly, but I'll do my best. All right. So, and Zoom also moved everything around, so I got to find the buttons again.
Of
All
course
right.
they did.
So, all right, I'm gonna hit the share button here. All right, and I'm gonna share my screen and apologize if the audio is not the best through Zoom, but we do what we can. And here we go.
At the ABA, it's the American Basketball Association. There was something fresh in the ABA. We get ready to show y'all, man, what y'all was missing. We owe a great deal to the ABA. Pro basketball's most exciting new idea was way ahead of its time. Changed the history of the league. The NBA, they weren't ready for us, man. But put on a show. The ABA emphasized innovation. It was all about doing things the NBA wasn't going to do. The most important contribution is the three-pointer. About the three-point shot. Harry, let's fly with a three-point bomb. Bang! There's no Steph Curry. The slam dunk contest started in the ABA. Julius Irving walked so Michael Jordan could fly. We had the flare collars, bell bottoms, platform shoes. We had the froze. They couldn't grow froze in the NBA. Ball players come out with soul. Soul is like a divine expression of who you are. ABA talent was comparable to the NBA. They had some good players. Moses Malone, George Gert, Rick Barry, George McGinnis, Spencer Haywood. Dr. J gave the league credibility. My style was full speed ahead. Dr. J is a black superhero. Oh man, he could fly. Ball players went through struggles, but you see the resilience. Basketball has always been an escape from the real world. It was the only thing in town where black people and white people mixed together. The leagues were rivals in the ABA. We were battling for our lives. These were my brothers. I was betrayed by my partners. Modern NBA came directly from the ABA. Looks a whole lot like the way we used to play in the ABA. This story has to be told. Time has marched on. Memories are forever.
All right, Jason, how did you get involved with that project?
Um, it really happened through Twitter. Uh, I had gone on Twitter, I don't know, about 4.5 years ago, and I was in the middle of doing a lot of ABA research for a project that I had come up with about 5 years ago, and I was really deep into a all the work I was doing. I was talking to a lot of the ex-ABA players. Once I started to get a hold of one or two of them, the floodgates kind of opened. Hold on one second. Please. All right, we're back. And yeah, talking to the ex-players was tremendous. You know, what I learned, not surprisingly, kind of sadly, is that nobody was talking to them. You know, their careers ended 45 years ago, and nobody was calling them up saying, hey, let's talk about, you know, the series you played against the Indiana Pacers in 1974. So when I contacted a lot of these guys, they were wonderful, and they were more than happy to share their experiences with me. One guy led to another. And so I was really excited and learning a lot when the person responsible for the documentary, one of them, started to go on Twitter and put up a lot of questions and pictures about the ABA. And I started answering because I knew all the answers. And over time, I started to communicate with him, and one thing led to another. And when they were getting ready to film, he said, you know, we'd love to have you come and be one of the historians for the documentary. So I did, and what was supposed to be maybe half an hour turned into an hour and a half. They got me at exactly the right time. I was just jam-packed with all the research I'd done, and the interview went very, very well. They told me they were going to use it. They ended up using a lot, which makes me very happy, very honored to be a part of a documentary that really gives respect to the players. To me, that's kind of the most important thing. They were really, really good. They were as good as the NBA, certainly at the top level. And a lot of these guys have been forgotten, and they deserve a lot more than that. And now they're getting it with the documentary. So for me to be in there talking about Dr. J's career, and then he comes on the screen talking about it, and then back to me, and then a highlight of him, that's a career highlight for me. So it worked out great, and I'm just happy that people are really enjoying it, getting great feedback, and the players are thrilled. So that's pretty cool.
Pretty amazing stuff. So we're going to cram as much content in the next 20 minutes of the history of the ABA that we can. But we'll remember, I'm sure you remember, Jason, that the predecessor to the ABA was a league called the ABL. And the first championship season was actually won by the team owned by a guy you know pretty well as a New Yorker, George Steinbrenner, the Cleveland Pipers. And Cleveland had one star, Dick Barnett, wound up in the Hall of Fame. But really, the breakout star of the ABL, who, by the way, we should mention, pioneered the three-point shot. That's what they'll always be remembered for. And that was carried over to the ABA later on. But the breakout star was a young guy named Connie Hawkins from Brooklyn, and Bed-Stuy to be specific. And how did Connie Hawkins, who many would call the predecessor to Dr. J, how did he wind up in a rinky-dink league like the ABL and later the ABA, where he did pretty well? Jason, can you give us a little background on Connie Hawkins?
Well, yeah, it's a sad story with a pretty darn good ending. He had been accused is the key word, of being involved with guys that were trying to fix college basketball games, which they were at the time. There had been a huge scandal a few years before. So everybody kind of had their eyes open. And there were guys that would go to the playgrounds and talk to players and say, hey, get to know them, take them to lunch, stuff like that. And Connie was not educated in those kind of things at all. And he got to know a guy. The guy took him to lunch a few times, got to know him a little bit. And then that guy named Jack Molinas got busted because he was trying to do these things and he was fixing games. And one of the names he said was, well, I talked to these kids. One of them was Connie Hawkins. And that was about it. And they brought Connie into the police station, kept him there for 2.5 days. Remember, this is 1961, 61. He had no rights. And so he finally kind of confessed after 2.5 days, and they told him he had to. So he kind of confessed to something. nothing was ever really, he wasn't charged with anything. And that was the end of it. He was kicked out of college. He was at the University of Iowa. That was done. And then that was it. He was out on the street because the NBA said, you're out. You'll never play in the NBA. We want nothing to do with anybody associated with this scandal. There were quite a few guys that ended up in that category, none of whom deserved it to be blackballed. But the NBA was the only game in town. So they could do what they wanted. They didn't want any scandal associated with them, so they just cut these guys out completely. He did play in the ABL as a very young man, dominated, and then spent the next 5 years playing wherever he could, mostly for the Globetrotters, which were a big deal in the early 60s, traveled the world. To be one of the best basketball players in the world and have to play for the Globetrotters instead of playing competitively is pretty sad. But he did it. He learned a lot of tricks. He did get to keep his skills kind of going. And then when the ABA came around, he was 6 years away from having played competitively. And he came in and just flat out dominated the league and ended up winning the championship as the best player and MVP. And I think that's about as clutch a performance as anybody has ever given because the pressure was on him. He was a schoolyard superstar. He had this huge reputation, but he hadn't proven it against anybody at all. And he did it. You know, with all the pressure, he actually took them all the way to Game 7 of the finals and won it and was the MVP. And I think he proved to himself, to everybody, that he was an all-time great basketball player. He did end up getting into the NBA. He sued the NBA successfully and then got a lot of money to play for the Phoenix Suns, did very well, and proved that he was one of the probably 25 greatest players to ever play the game and probably one of the 5 coolest players ever. He had the biggest hands of all time. He could hold the ball, move it around like nobody's since, and was just a beautiful player to watch. So I saw him play when he was at the Lakers. At the end of his career, he was still really cool to watch. He had a very unique game. Nobody played like him. Behind the back passes, no look, fake the ball like this, bring it back. So he was one of a kind.
Absolutely. And the guy that might have rivaled him that year for the breakout star of the ABA couldn't play in the ABA that year because he was under contract. The ABA tried to poach Rick Barry from the NBA, and they failed that first year, and he wound up having to sit out the whole year. He wound up being a radio broadcaster. That's the only thing he could do to earn any money for them. And then he finally got to play next year, and even though it was kind of an injury-plagued season, his Oakland Oaks still did very well in the title. What do you remember about Rick Barry's ABA days?
Well, I think the thing is that he was, Connie Hawkins was great, but he was still relatively unknown to the general public. Rick Barry was a superstar in the NBA. So for him to jump to the ABA gave the ABA credibility. That's what they needed. They needed a star, a name that everybody knew. Oh, that guy's in your league now? Then your league must be real. And they got Rick Barry. And he was white, he was good looking, he was well spoken. So he was the perfect guy for them to steal. He did sit out the first year. He got paid, didn't play, and then came back and like you said, got hurt halfway through the year. His team ended up winning it without him, which I find kind of ironic. He doesn't wear that ring because he didn't play in the playoffs. But he ended up playing 5 years in the ABA, was a phenomenal player, then went to the NBA and won a championship with Golden State as their best player. So he was the face of the ABA for the first 3 or 4 years and carried the league to a degree and did a good job of being a spokesman for the league.
Yeah, so we had Connie Hawkins and the Pipers winning the first year. We had Rick Barry not playing, but still inspiring the Oakland Oaks to the second year. And then the third year came along what many consider to be the Boston Celtics dynasty of the ABA, and that's the Indiana Pacers. Tell us about the Pacers, Jason.
Yeah, the Pacers were a team that really, their advantage was that they started to build their core of players in the first year. And by the third year, they had a group of 4 or 5 guys. Mel Daniels was the center. He was the best center in the league. Bob Nedelicki was the power forward. He was a great player. Freddie Lewis was the point guard. He'd been there all 3 years. Great player. Billy Keller was a little guard that they had. great player. And then Roger Brown was their best player. He was a friend of Connie Hawkins, a rival to Connie Hawkins in high school, and also caught up in the same scandal as Connie Hawkins, also didn't do anything, and was also blackballed from the NBA. So he was exactly in the same spot as Hawkins, came into the ABA, and in his third year was the dominant player in the playoffs for the Pacers and really won the championship for them. And that was the first time that anybody really hit a bunch of three-pointers in the biggest games. He hit, I believe, 6 in game 4 to win that game, and then he hit 3 or 4 more to win it in game 6. Just legendary performance by a legendary player who most people hadn't heard of. And like Hawkins, he proved that had he been in the NBA starting in 64, 65, the NBA would have been very different. And I would say probably likely if he and Connie Hawkins were in the NBA, the Celtics would not have won as many titles as they did. It would have been a different league. Those guys were legitimately great superstars, but it didn't happen. So they were in the ABA, they were having fun, they were lighting it up, and both very, very successful. And the Pacers went on to win 2 more. So they won 3 out of the 9 years and were in the finals 2 other times. So 5 of 9 years in the finals. Pretty impressive.
Pretty nice run. Let's talk about the Kentucky Colonels and the best center who ever played in the ABA, Artis Gilmore.
Well, I don't know. Mel Daniels was pretty good and held his own with Gilmore. Gilmore had the bigger name, was taller, and had more height. But Daniels, yeah, he beat him one year, and Gilmore never beat him when it counted. So I'd say they're 1 and 2, but anybody in Indiana would argue that one. But Gilmore was a college superstar, made it to the finals. The ABA signing him was a huge deal. The NBA wanted him badly. He was the rival to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who the ABA did not get. They should have and did not. That's in the documentary. It's a great story, how they blew it. But they didn't get Kareem and they didn't get Gilmore. He went to the ABA and the Colonels were really good every year, failed for 4 years in a row, but then finally won the championship in 1975. And he was obviously a huge, huge part of it. Great afro, cool dude, really nice guy, and in the Hall of Fame. So yeah, he was a primetime ABA player.
Yeah. And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about my hometown team, the Virginia Squires, the team that Rick Barry turned up his nose at when the franchise relocated and refused to go. He wound up playing in your neck of the woods, Jason. He wound up playing with the Nets at one point. But Virginia Squires were still very well covered. They had their original superstar who wound up in the Hall of Fame, Charlie Scott. Charlie eventually, like Connie Hawkins, wound up in Phoenix, and he was still under contract. He just bailed, and I guess Virginia decided they didn't have the money to sue them, so they just let him go. But they were still well covered because at one point, it wasn't for a brief run between them. They had both Julius Erving and one of the other ABA superstars, George Gervin, in the same lineup for a while.
They did, yeah. Julius Erving started his career with the Squires. That's covered in the documentary. There is some amazing footage that nobody had ever seen of Julius Erving as a rookie, just flying all over the court, doing things that nobody had ever done on the basketball court. That's a big statement, but it's true. He was the innovator of, going up in the air, going between guys, dunking it over his head in traffic, whatever. Nobody had done that stuff the way he did it. He did that in Virginia. Almost got them to the finals as a rookie without Charlie Scott, who, like you said, left the team with 10 games to go in the season. He just bolted to Phoenix, jumped leagues, and that made Dr. J the star. He was ready for it. He dominated in the playoffs and lost to Rick Barry in Game 7 of the Eastern Finals. That's covered in the documentary. There's some great back and forth interviews between Rick Barry and Julius about that series and covering each other. It's awesome. I'm in there, which is pretty cool for me to be kind of in the mix. So the Squires had Dr. J. The next year, they got George Gervin, who nobody had heard of at all, ever. Got kicked out of college and ended up being one of the greatest scorers in basketball history. So they were pretty good that year. And then Dr. J left, got traded to the Nets. and then promptly won the championship with the Nets. He was ready and won another one too. So the Squires, they had great players. The owner never had enough money. He could have enough money to sign guys, but he didn't have enough to keep them. And so he would end up selling his best player to pay for the next wave of guys. So he did it with Charlie Scott left, Julius Erving he had to sell, and George Gervin he had to sell a year later. So they were close, but the owner just didn't have it.
Exactly. So around this time, and some say it might have been the motivation from the beginning, inspired by the AFL, who eventually merged with the NFL, the ABA was now in merger talks with the NBA because it was in the best interest of both leagues not to have bidding wars for these players. So unfortunately, some of these teams we just talked about, like the Kentucky Colonels, the Virginia Squires, never made the final cut, and they had some sort of they were like dice loaded against them because rival NBA owners didn't want teams so close to their market invading their market. So the Washington Bullets and the Chicago Bulls kind of put the kibosh on them. But four teams eventually did make it. The four teams, of course, were the New Jersey Nets. They were, of course, the San Antonio Spurs, where George Gervin wound up. And probably the most famous team, the Denver Nuggets, and the fourth team, Jason, help me out, the Pacers, of course.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
how did that work out that it only wound up with those four teams?
The NBA, said we're only going to take four, and the ABA was in such deep trouble at that point that they didn't have much negotiating leverage. And the NBA kind of just turned the screws on them and said, we're just taking four. They bought out the owner of the Kentucky Colonels. He accepted it. And then they made a deal with the owners of the St. Louis Spirits, which the NBA thought they made a pretty good deal. And it turned out to be the worst deal of all time for the NBA. That deal, by the way, was negotiated by a young lawyer named David Stern, who became Commissioner David Stern. And that was the one black mark in his entire career because he gave the owners of the St. Louis Spirits, who had only owned the team for 2 years, and they weren't even that good, they got a piece of the television money from the other four ABA teams forever. And the key is the words in perpetuity, which means forever. And usually a lawyer will get rid of that in perpetuity because nobody ever signs a contract that is forever. But somehow it snuck through, and those owners ended up making about $800 million over the next 40 years until the NBA finally bought them out about 6 or 7 years ago. Just crazy. So, they got a lot of money. That's in the documentary. Interestingly, one of the brothers, it was two brothers, one of them is still alive, and he's actually not happy about it. You would think he'd think I made the greatest deal in the history of sports, which he did. He wanted to own a team. He didn't. The money was great. He was already a rich guy. And there wasn't that much money the first 10 or 15 years. It didn't change his life. He wanted to own a team. So he tried to buy an NBA team before, didn't get it. I think he tried again later, didn't get it. So he was a little bit, I would say, bitter. Even though he got all that money, he was a competitor. He wanted to own a basketball team. And turns out he only did for 2 years.
Yeah, it's just the way it goes. And St. Louis would have been a good market too, but the team wasn't very good. So
Yeah.
I thought they kind of made a mistake not including St. Louis, which was actually a big league market, but just didn't have a big league team.
No,
Um,
they didn't. No.
yeah, Marvin Barnes played there for a while. He was
I
good.
think I think a big part of it was that Denver and San Antonio had serious fan bases that turned out to see the games. Like Denver averaged 12,000 a game. I think they were fourth in either league in attendance. Their attendance was off the hook, so they're in. And San Antonio averaged 7 or 8,000, and their fans were nuts. There's nothing else down there. They loved the Spurs. So that's why those two teams were in, because the fan base was there and they had proven they would buy tickets. In St. Louis, they did not buy tickets.
Yeah.
Nobody went to the Spirits games either year. So the NBA thought, this is not a market that really supported it, whereas the others, and Indiana, of course, did, and the Nets had Dr. J. So that kind of made the decision.
Yeah, they had to make some sacrifices. The Nets owned an onerous amount of money to the Knicks for market invasion, and they wound up having to sell Dr. J to the Sixers to make up for that. And of course, the the Rockets had to give up their name because Houston already wore the Rockets, so they became the Nuggets, which I always thought was kind of lame. The Nuggets, it's not exactly a fierce name. But Jason, before we end the ABA discussion here, do you have another project coming up on the ABA that you're working on?
Yes, I'm working on a book. And I'm glad you asked because we haven't mentioned the Utah Stars. And that was a team that really gets lost in the shuffle. They were the second best team in the league for 5 years, the middle 5 years, which were really good years. They won one championship and they went to another final and lost it to Dr. J. They were the arch rival to the Indiana Pacers. And when both teams were at full strength, Utah won twice and Indiana won twice. The difference is when Indiana went to their two finals, they won them both. Utah won one and lost one. But Utah Stars were a phenomenal team. I've gotten to know some of their guys. Willie Wise was a forward that, for people that know the NBA today, he was Kawhi Leonard. He played ridiculous defense against the other team's best player, and he was a phenomenal scorer himself. Just an all-time great player. Only played 5 great years and he got hurt. So he was there. James Jones was a great guard nobody knows about, maybe the best guard to ever play in the ABA. He ended up in the NBA. And so the Stars were just they were also a dynasty that just got edged out by the Pacers. So I'm working on a book about them and kind of using them to tell the story of the ABA. A bunch of those players are still friendly, which is in the documentary. It was a brotherhood. They saw themselves as kind of the little guy fighting the big guy, and the players really bonded. And it's really cool I'll be on a phone call with two of the guys, that played for the Stars, and then they'll call a third guy. And that guy will answer the phone and see who it is. And then they just start talking as if it's 50 years ago. And they're giving each other flack and they're using nicknames and they're going over stuff. And you can tell that, these were guys that went to war together, so to speak, and, played in the biggest games, supported each other, loved each other, and still do. And they're in their, late 70s. So that's part of what the book is about, is the bond between the guys that played there on that team and other teams. It's really, really strong. And I've learned that. And I think they're a team that they won a championship. Nobody remembers it except in Utah. And they deserve, some respect. So that's what I'm going to give them.
All right, we'll have to have you on when that book comes out. But Jason, I would be remiss our last 2 minutes here without asking at least one horse racing question. Ted Nafi is off the Derby trail. Who are you looking at for the Derby?
Well, I don't have a Derby horse. I was not that impressed with any of the big preps. Thought they were solid races. Nobody jumped out at me. So I don't have one. I think we know Bob Baffert's not going to win. He doesn't win now that Heisa is with us. His horses they just don't have that other gear, Jay. The last 100 yards, it's not happening. So I'll be playing against him. I can tell you that. I really don't know. I'm looking forward to the next round, and I think a horse or two will emerge. But right now, no. I don't really have one. I was impressed with a maiden called Cherokee Nation that won for Baffert. He's going to be in the Santa Anita Derby. He's exciting. Baffert used to be able to get horses like that there. Now, not so sure, but he was super talented, very impressive. There's a horse called Paladin that I like. I'm excited to see what happens with him. But yeah, it seems really wide open this year. It always is. They don't run at all. They all have 2 or 3 races. So it's really hard to feel really strongly about anybody.
Absolutely. And speaking of that next round, Steve and I's next Saddle Up podcast will be at the end of the month. We will be covering the Florida Derby, which is one of the big preps of the season, along with the Arkansas Derby on the same day. both
Yep.
grade ones, and the San Diego Derby will be right behind. So we'll probably have a little bit to say on that. But that will be a topic for a separate show. In the meantime, Jason, thank you for being the first guest on the first Horse Racing World Channel Sports Special. There will be more non-horse racing content on the channel, even though it'll be still primarily a horse racing channel. But really looking forward to your book. And if you have not seen that documentary on Amazon Prime, check it out, Soul Power, with ABA historian Jason Levin. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. And just hello to everybody. Thanks for all the support for 20 plus years of the show, and the handicappers. And these guys are still doing their usual great job. And now's when it heats up, right? We're in March, so now's when the Derby Trail heats up and the action starts to heat up. So I'm getting more excited about that too. But I really recommend everybody watch the documentary if you like basketball at all, or sports history. It's all there. It's 4 hours, 4 episodes. You can watch it whenever you want. It's just sitting there waiting for you. So enjoy it. If you want to communicate with me, you know how to do it through the website. Send me an email, please do. Let me know what you thought. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Jason.